You are about to witness deception with a 5.6 trillion projection as promoted and endorsed by the Democratic Policy Committee and advanced by Senator Obama. The AICPA says the potential to mislead a third-party reader of financial forecasts is greater than for historical statements.
But I ask you, is the $1 trillion here today? And the answer is no. That's a 10-year projection. So what we're in essence doing is we're committing money today that we think and hope and pray will come to Washington in the years 2006, 2009, 2011. My friends, how many of you would plan a vacation based on a 10-year weather forecast? You would think that's sheer nonsense.
George Bush's policies have taken us from a projected $5.6 trillion surplus at the end of the Clinton administration.
We must look for consistency. Where there is want of it, we must suspect deception. Sherlock Holmes.
Surplus projections over the next 10 years from the Congressional Surplus Budget Office that does estimates. Now, in the document that said that we will have $5.6 trillion, the Congressional Budget Office also said that there is only a 50% probability that the 5-year projections will be correct, and they say in the 10-year projections they cannot even assess whether or not they'll occur because they have no experience at it. And so if you take away the fact that these projections are kind of guesswork, like, you know, whether the weather, in fact, will have snow next week or last week, and maybe it didn't, then if you take away that, the whole basis of this tax cut then becomes illusory. And we know these numbers are just based upon nothing but guesswork.
Back in 1929, a year that isn't exactly one of our best years in American history,
there was apparently a similar tactic being used as you have on display here. That tactic was trying to deceive investors by presenting budget projections that did not have meaningful cautionary statements. Why do we know this? Because in response to the stock market crash of 1929, the Securities Act of 1933 was passed. The act provides for full disclosure of all material facts associated with the projection.
Here are the relevant sections in the Securities Act of 1933.
So therefore, for you to not be deceitful in your presentation of the 5.6 trillion projected surplus, you must include cautionary statements such as those provided by the CBO in the very report you reference. There are 11 pages of uncertainties in that report, and I'm only going to cite 2 of them.
The first is a statement from the CBO. It says, moreover, projections that are quite different from the baseline also have a significant probability of coming to pass. In fact, here is a graph the CBO provided explaining that exact point. Look at the fan of possibilities that were presented in the 2001 CBO report.
The second example is, thus, the short-term outlook for the economy and hence for the budget is particularly uncertain when the business cycle may be approaching a turning point. And as we know, in 2001 there was a recession. So let me stress, the CBO said, and hence the budget is particularly uncertain because of the possibility of that turn in the business cycle.
Senator Obama.
There is a reason the CEO of Enron never dared to present a budget projection the way you do.
Because he could go to prison, but it doesn't apply to you because you're running for president. More examples of Democratic Party participation in the deception.
We do not have the surplus you're talking about here. First of all, we're talking about a tax cut based on a budget we haven't seen on a surplus. We can't guarantee.
When President Bush took office, on a trajectory of $5.6 trillion in surplus.
We could see in the year 2006 conceivably a deficit based on the differences we've seen in past forecasts from what actually occurred, or we could see in that year as much as $1 trillion surplus. Is that correct?
Both of those possibilities are possible, yes.
I just want to urge people, that is the uncertainty in this forecast. He inherited surpluses, forecasted surpluses of $5.6 trillion.
The trail to where this Democratic Party deception began leads us to Senator Byron Dorgan, Democrat, North Dakota, chairman of the Democratic Policy Committee. Here are Senator Dorgan's positions on the $5.6 trillion projected budget surplus. On February 17, 2001, Senator Dorgan said the following: economic forecasts are no more reliable than weather forecasts. And then on February 12, 2007, Senator Dorgan, the economic projections in 2001 showed the U.S. would have a $5.6 trillion surplus in the coming decade. 2007 is a complete contradiction to 2001. Senator Dorgan has just demonstrated intentional deceit. On May 22, 2003, Senator Byron Dorgan, chairman of the Democratic Policy Committee, issued the following statement. The release said, the $5.6 trillion 10-year surplus that President Bush inherited is now a deficit of more than $2 trillion, for a total fiscal reversal of well over $7 trillion. This statement is 27 months after Senator Dorgan said that economic forecasts were no more reliable than weather forecasts. Can anyone forget something this significant in 27 months? From as unreliable as a weather forecast to Bush inherited. The Democratic Policy Committee has served Senate Democrats by providing research and legislative support, developing policy proposals, publishing reports on important legislation and policy issues. So the committee that supports Democrats has resorted to the tactic of deception with a projection that was made famous in 1929. There are no cautionary statements about the use of a projection in this press release, and chaired by Senator Dorgan, who once said the projection was no better than a weather forecast. So to answer the question on how did this deception begin, it appears that the Democratic Policy Committee in May of 2003 is the place to look.
But we can take a riverboat gamble that perhaps the CBO one time is right, and that maybe the $5.6 trillion is going to be there.
George Bush's policies have taken us from a projected $5.6 trillion surplus at the end of the Clinton administration.
And we know these numbers are just based upon nothing but guesswork.